Alright, so I've decided to burn an hour of my time to draw you guys Goku. Let's just say it was via fan request. Starting off, I'm just setting up my canvas and my brushes. If your brush doesn't feel right to you, then this entire drawing's not going to feel right to you. Maybe later on I'll do a tutorial showing you guys how I set up my brushes for my various techniques. And you might notice that I'm saving my brush and deleting all the ones that I'm not planning on using. That way I can quickly switch back and forth between them. And I'm not going to get too focused on this. I'm just going to try and keep it pretty quick and simple for both our sakes. Classic DBZ eyes, no eyelids unless they're asleep or injured. And I'm going to create a new layer for the hair. Since most of the time the hair comes down in front of the face, I don't want to have to work around the facial features if I need to erase something. If you want to get better at sketching, then I actually challenge you to do 2 sketches a night, spend maybe 10 minutes on each of them, and do this every night for a couple of weeks, and you'll notice that you'll start getting much faster at sketching and much better at picturing what you're sketching in your head. It allows you to sort of subconsciously learn which lines are most important to the drawing and then which ones aren't as critical. You guys know how Goku's always giving these grand speeches, on honor and life and how good will always conquer evil. I mean, that's all great and everything, but just once I'd like to see him get pissed off and give somebody the finger. It'd be completely out of character for him. Anyways, I've just dragged all of my layers over into Illustrator. And I'm just quickly setting up my brushes with pressure, and then I double clicked on the brush tool itself to set up the sensitivity and fidelity options. Pretty simple. Now I'm just going through and inking the whole thing. And again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. If you need to adjust a line, then you can use your direct select tool to go back and sort of finesse it a little bit. And as I draw my lines, especially the hairlines, I'm going from thin to thick. It's kind of pointless to use a pressure sensitive pen if you're not going to take advantage of that sensitivity. And if you want to practice it, a great method is doing calligraphy. Handwriting script and going from really thin curly lines into something really thick and bold, and then back into thin again, and so on and so on. And I just zoomed in a little bit so that way I can get a little finer detail on the facial features. Otherwise, I try to stay zoomed out as much as possible. It allows me to keep a better perspective on the drawing, as well as make sure that all of my lines are somewhat the same thickness in certain areas and thinness in others, and so forth. Plus, if I get zoomed into an area too far, I tend to spend too much time in one area, adding too much detail, rather than branching out and kind of adding it around the drawing. And right now I'm going through and just adding some quick highlights, or where I'm going to place highlights. And I am taking the long way of filling this in. I could have just done an autofill, but I was watching TV. And sometimes there's something therapeutic about just doing something mundane, allowing yourself to think about the rest of the illustration. And now I've put these layers back into Photoshop, lining them up properly, and making the black hair just a little bit lighter so I can see some of the outlines. I'm going to go in, add a glow to this ball, just an inner glow, and the blending option's pretty simple. Not going for anything too complex this time around. I've created a layer that's behind my outline for me to color in, and that's where I'm adding all these colors. I also used, for some of my areas, the areas that I could, I used the magic wand to select those areas and then autofill them with color. Of course, Goku's famous orange gi. I did a dark background because I wanted the ball to look like it was really illuminated. Now we've got his color down, but we need a little bit more lighting and shadowing. So I'm going to create a new layer, set it to multiply, use darker tones, and bring my opacity down just a little bit so that way it's not completely black. My darker tones I also add a little bit of red to. Makes it seem or feel a little bit more natural. At least with flesh it does. Okay, now I'm going to use my eraser to kind of refine some of the shadows a little bit. And now I'm adding sort of a second layer of shadowing at a much lighter opacity. Makes it feel a bit more realistic, mixing a soft shadow with a hard shadow in certain areas. And the hand kind of looks like crap, but again, I'm aiming to make this a quick tutorial. Okay, I just made a copy of my hair. Now I'm going to go in and sort of erase a little bit of it so that you see the lighter color that's underneath it, giving it a highlighted effect. And there's many ways of doing this. You don't have to use my exact method. I change my method depending upon what I'm doing. Just whatever suits me at the time. Alright, I'm going to give this ball of energy a little bit of a lightning effect. And if you want to do that, it's pretty simple. All I'm doing is just more or less dragging my hand from A to B while acting like I'm having a seizure. You just have to keep the pen with just the right amount of pressure that's between a thick line and a thin line, so that way it kind of jitters around a little bit. But moving along, I'm also adding a highlight against his skin, so that way it really adds to the effect of the ball glowing. And I'll use the smudge tool to kind of smear those highlights around a little bit, play with them, see what looks better. Oh, and my highlight layer is actually above all of my other layers. It's usually good to set the blending mode to screen or overlay when you want to get this kind of an effect. And that pretty much does it. I could go in and make the highlights a bit better, smooth out the hair, and add a bunch more shadowing and other details, but I think this is good for what it is. Spent probably about 45 minutes on it, and hopefully you guys learned a thing or two. Have a good one.